My wife looked at me like I was something she'd scraped off her shoe. "Stand behind everyone at the company dinner tonight," she said, adjusting her diamond earrings in our bedroom mirror. "And for God's sake, don't embarrass me in front of the executives." I nodded, like I'd been doing for the past 7 years, swallowing the humiliation that had become my daily bread. But when the new CEO walked into that ballroom and locked eyes with me, everything I thought I knew about my life shattered like the champagne glass that fell from my wife's trembling hand. My name is Nathan Brooks. I'm 42 years old, and until 3 months ago, I thought I was living the life everyone dreams about. I married Victoria Hastings when I was 35. She was the golden girl of Denver's corporate elite, a senior marketing director at Hastings and Reed Financial Group, the same company her father had built from nothing 30 years ago. When we met at a charity auction, I was running a small nonprofit that helped underprivileged kids learn coding. I wasn't wealthy, wasn't connected, wasn't the kind of man Victoria's family expected her to marry, but she said she loved me. She said I was different from all the corporate sharks she'd dated. She said my passion for helping others made her want to be a better person. For the first 2 years, I believed every word. Victoria's father, Richard Hastings, barely acknowledged my existence. Her mother, Eleanor, would smile politely during family dinners while asking Victoria in front of me if she was sure this was the life she wanted. Her younger brother, Preston, who worked as VP of operations at the family company, made jokes about my nonprofit salary that cut deeper than any knife I'd ever felt. But Victoria defended me back then. She told them I had integrity, that money wasn't everything, that she'd chosen me because I represented something real in a world of fake corporate handshakes and calculated friendships. The change happened slowly, like ice forming on a lake 1 degree at a time, until suddenly you're walking on a surface that could crack beneath you at any moment. It started about 3 years into our marriage when Victoria got promoted to Executive Director of Client Relations. The promotion came with a corner office, a 6-figure salary, and an attitude adjustment I never saw coming. Suddenly, my nonprofit work was cute instead of meaningful. My friends were too blue-collar for her taste. The way I dressed embarrassed her at corporate functions. The things I cared about seemed trivial compared to her quarterly earnings reports and executive board meetings. Pause for subscriber request. If you're finding this story compelling, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel, hit that like button, and leave a comment below sharing your thoughts. Your support helps us bring you more real stories about ordinary people facing extraordinary situations. Now, let's continue. The company dinner was supposed to be the biggest event of the year for Hastings and Reed Financial Group. They were announcing their new CEO after Richard Hastings decided to step down and transition to chairman of the board. Everyone assumed Preston would get the position. He'd been grooming for it his entire life, working his way up through every department, making all the right connections, saying all the right things. Victoria had been ecstatic about the possibility, already planning how Preston's promotion would elevate our family's status even further. "Nathan, are you even listening to me?" Victoria snapped, pulling me back to the present moment in our bedroom. She was wearing a black designer dress that probably cost more than I used to make in a month at the nonprofit. I'd left that job 2 years ago at her insistence, taking a position as a project coordinator at a tech startup that paid better but made me feel empty inside. "I'm listening," I said, adjusting my tie. It was one of the expensive ones Victoria had bought me, silk from some Italian designer whose name I could never remember. I missed my old ties, the ones I'd picked up at discount stores and worn proudly because they represented honest work and honest living. "Good, because tonight is crucial for Preston and therefore crucial for our family," Victoria continued, checking her makeup one final time. "Richard is making the announcement, and we need to show unified family support. That means you stand with the family, but not prominently. Smile, be pleasant, but don't engage in lengthy conversations with the executives. They're there to celebrate Preston, not to hear about your little coding programs or whatever you're working on now." "They're not little programs, Victoria. We're developing software that could help Nathan." She turned to face me fully, her green eyes cold. "Tonight isn't about you. It's about my family's legacy. Can you please, just this once, not make it about your need to feel important?" I felt the familiar sting of her words but swallowed it down like bitter medicine. "I understand." "Do you?" Because the last company function we attended, you spent 20 minutes talking to Gerald Morrison about some charity initiative when he clearly wanted to discuss business with Preston. You made us look amateurish. That conversation with Gerald had been meaningful. He'd actually seemed interested in the work I was doing with underprivileged youth, had asked genuine questions about outcomes and scalability. But I didn't argue. I'd learned that arguing with Victoria only made things worse. The ballroom at the Grand Belmont Hotel was exactly what you'd expect from a company with Hastings and Reed's reputation. Crystal chandeliers that probably cost more than houses, tables set with china and silverware that gleamed under perfect lighting, and a crowd of executives in designer suits networking like their lives depended on it. And maybe their lives did depend on it. This world valued connections over character, appearances over authenticity, status over substance. Victoria left my side within 30 seconds of arriving, gravitating toward a cluster of senior executives with the practiced ease of someone who'd been born into this world. I watched her laugh at something one of the men said, touching his arm in that perfectly calculated way that suggested interest without being inappropriate. She was good at this game. Better than good. She was a master. "Nathan Brooks, isn't it?" a voice said from behind me. I turned to find Gerald Morrison, the same executive Victoria had scolded me about talking to at the last event. He was older, probably late 60s, with kind eyes that seemed out of place in this Shark Tank. "Mr. Morrison, good to see you again," I said, shaking his hand. "Please, call me Gerald. I've been meaning to follow up on our conversation about your youth coding initiative. Have you made any progress on securing funding?" Before I could answer, I felt Victoria appear beside me like a heat-seeking missile. "Gerald, how wonderful to see you," she said, her smile bright and fake. "I hope my husband hasn't been boring you with his hobby projects." The words hit me like a slap, but I kept my expression neutral. Gerald's eyebrows rose slightly. "Actually, I find Nathan's work quite fascinating. There's a real need for programs that—" "That's very kind of you to say," Victoria interrupted smoothly. "But I know you're here to celebrate tonight's big announcement. Have you heard any rumors about the timing?" She'd effectively dismissed my work and redirected the conversation in under 10 seconds. Gerald looked at me with something like sympathy before allowing Victoria to steer him into corporate small talk. I excused myself and made my way to the bar, ordering a whiskey I didn't really want. Around me, Victoria's family held court like royalty. Richard Hastings stood near the stage, his silver hair and commanding presence drawing people to him like moths to a flame. Eleanor worked the room with practiced grace, her jewelry catching the light as she moved from group to group. Preston stood surrounded by mid-level executives, already acting like the CEO he expected to become within the hour. "You must be Nathan." I turned to find a woman I didn't recognize standing beside me at the bar. She was perhaps in her early 40s, with sharp, intelligent eyes and an air of quiet confidence that stood out in a room full of loud personalities. She wore a simple navy dress that was elegant without being ostentatious. "I am? And you are?" "Someone who's very interested in meeting you," she said with a slight smile. "I've heard quite a bit about the man who gave up a meaningful career to support his wife's ambitions." I felt defensive heat rise in my chest. "I didn't give up anything. I made a choice to make someone else happy at the expense of your own fulfillment," she finished, gently. "I know that story well. I lived it myself once." Before I could respond, the lights dimmed and Richard Hastings took the stage. The room fell silent as people found their seats. Victoria appeared suddenly, grabbing my arm and pulling me toward the family table at the front. "Where have you been?" she hissed. "You're supposed to be with the family for the announcement." We sat down just as Richard began speaking, his voice booming through the sound system. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us tonight for what is undoubtedly one of the most significant moments in Hastings and Reed's history." I tuned out most of his speech, the same corporate platitudes about excellence and innovation and stakeholder value that I'd heard 1,000 times. Victoria sat rigidly beside me, her hand gripping mine so tightly I could feel her nails digging into my palm. On her other side, Eleanor wore an expression of supreme satisfaction. Preston looked like he was barely containing his excitement. "And so it gives me tremendous pleasure to introduce to you the new CEO of Hastings and Reed Financial Group, someone whose vision and expertise will take this company into the next generation of success." Victoria squeezed my hand even harder. This was it. Preston's moment. The culmination of years of positioning and planning. "Please welcome Madison Rivers." The name hit like a thunderclap. The room erupted in polite applause, but I could feel the shock rippling through our table like an electric current. Victoria's hand went limp in mine. Eleanor's face had frozen in a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Preston looked like he'd been punched in the stomach. And Richard, on stage, maintained his professional composure, but I could see the tension in his shoulders. The woman from the bar stepped onto the stage, and my entire world tilted on its axis. It couldn't be her. After 18 years, it couldn't possibly be her. But as she took the microphone and turned to face the audience, there was no denying the truth. Madison Rivers was Maddie Chen, the woman I'd been in love with before I ever met Victoria. The woman who'd disappeared from my life without explanation 18 years ago. The woman I'd spent years trying to forget. She scanned the audience as she began her acceptance speech, her voice steady and professional. "Thank you, Richard, and thank you all for this incredible opportunity. Hastings & Reed has a remarkable legacy, and I'm honored to be entrusted with leading this organization into the future." Her eyes found mine, and I watched the professional facade crack for just a moment. Her voice wavered mid-sentence. She recovered quickly, but not before I saw recognition and something else flash across her face. Grief? Regret? I couldn't tell. Victoria noticed immediately. Her head snapped toward me, then back to Madison on stage. "Do you know her?" she whispered urgently. "A long time ago," I managed to say. Madison continued her speech, but I could barely hear the words. "I was 18 years in the past, sitting in a coffee shop near the university where we'd both been students. I was studying computer science on a full scholarship, working 3 part-time jobs to make ends meet. Maddie was pre-law, brilliant and passionate about using the legal system to help people who couldn't help themselves. We'd met during a campus volunteer program, both of us drawn to service work that most students avoided because it didn't pad their resumes the right way. We fell in love the way young people do, intensely and completely, believing we'd found something rare and real in a world that seemed increasingly fake. We studied together, volunteered together, planned a future together that involved more meaning than money. I was going to use my coding skills to build programs that helped communities. She was going to practice public interest law. We were naive and idealistic, and absolutely certain that we could change the world if we just worked hard enough and stayed true to our principles. Then one day during our senior year, she simply vanished. No explanation, no goodbye, just an empty dorm room and an email account that bounced messages back as undeliverable. I'd searched for her desperately, called her family only to be told she didn't want contact with anyone from her college life. I'd spent months in a fog of confusion and grief, unable to understand what I'd done wrong or why someone I loved so completely could disappear without even telling me why. Eventually, I moved on because that's what people do. I finished my degree, started the nonprofit, built a life around the principles Maddie and I had shared, even though she was no longer in it. And then I met Victoria, who represented everything Maddie and I had promised we'd never become. But Victoria wanted me, pursued me, made me feel valued in ways I hadn't felt since Maddie left. And so I'd convinced myself that maybe young idealism wasn't enough, that maybe being practical and secure was better than chasing dreams that disappeared without warning. Madison finished her speech to enthusiastic applause. As people stood and moved toward her to offer congratulations, she made her way directly to our table, bypassing Richard and the other executives who were trying to intercept her. She stopped directly in front of me, and the entire room seemed to hold its breath. "Nathan Brooks," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I never stopped searching for you." Victoria stood up abruptly, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. "Excuse me, but who exactly are you to my husband?" Madison turned to her, and I saw tears forming in her eyes. "I'm the woman who loved him 18 years ago. The woman whose family forced her to disappear from his life because he wasn't wealthy enough, connected enough, worthy enough in their eyes. The woman who spent nearly 2 decades trying to find him again and make him things right." The champagne glass slipped from Victoria's hand, shattering on the floor. The sound seemed to break whatever spell had frozen everyone in place. Suddenly, everyone was talking at once. Richard was trying to manage the situation. Eleanor was demanding explanations. Preston was looking between Madison and our table with confusion and calculation in his eyes. But I could only stare at Maddie, processing her words. Her family had forced her to leave? She'd been searching for me? "I don't understand," I said, standing up to face her properly. You disappeared. You cut off all contact. I thought... My father found out about us, Madison said, her voice cracking. Found out I was serious about a scholarship student with no family connections and no money. He gave me an ultimatum. Break it off completely and go to Harvard Law like he'd planned. Or he'd cut me off entirely and make sure you lost your scholarships. He had connections at the university, Nathan. He could have destroyed your future with a few phone calls. The words hit me like physical blows. So you just left? Without even telling me why? I was 21 and terrified. He convinced me that if I truly loved you, I'd let you finish your degree and build your life without the burden of my family's interference. He said if we were meant to be together, we'd find each other again after we'd both established ourselves. He promised he wouldn't interfere with your scholarships if I agreed to go to Harvard and cut all contact until after graduation. And then? I asked, needing to understand. Madison's tears were flowing freely now, her professional composure completely gone. And then he moved me to Boston, monitored everything I did, controlled every aspect of my life. After law school, he pushed me into corporate law instead of public interest work. Every time I tried to find you, he'd find out and threaten to destroy whatever business you were building. He had investigators following you for years, Nathan. When you started the nonprofit, he was ready to pull funding from every donor you approached. I had to stay away to protect you. This is insane, Victoria said, her voice shrill. You expect us to believe some melodramatic story about forbidden love and controlling fathers? This is a business dinner, not a romance novel. Madison turned to Victoria with an expression I couldn't quite read. You're Victoria Hastings. I know who you are. I've known for years that Nathan married you. Do you have any idea how much that destroyed me? Watching from a distance as the man I loved married someone else because I'd been too much of a coward to fight for him? Then why didn't you fight? Victoria demanded. If this story is even true, why didn't you tell Nathan the truth and let him make his own choices? Because I was 21 and scared and my father convinced me I was doing the right thing, Madison shot back. Because he made me believe that real love meant sacrifice. Because I trusted him when he said Nathan would be better off without my family's complications in his life. I made the wrong choice, and I've regretted it every single day for 18 years. Your father, I said slowly, pieces clicking into place. Who was your father, Maddie? She took a shaky breath. James Chen, CEO of Chen Financial Holdings until his death 5 years ago. And yes, before you ask, he left me everything. I used that money to build my own investment firm from scratch, stayed in corporate finance because I was good at it, even though I hated it, and worked my way up until I had enough influence to negotiate this position. I specifically pursued the CEO role at Hastings and Reed because I knew you were connected to this company through your wife. I've spent 5 years maneuvering into a position where I could finally tell you the truth without my father's threats hanging over us. The ballroom had gone completely silent. Every executive, every employee, every person in that room was watching our drama unfold like we were actors in a play they couldn't look away from. Richard Hastings stepped forward, his face red. Ms. Rivers, this is highly inappropriate. Your personal history has no place in a professional setting. With all due respect, Richard, Madison said, turning to face him with steel in her voice. I'm the CEO of this company now, and my first act in this position is to announce a major strategic shift. Hastings and Reed is going to launch a new division focused on social impact investing. We're going to use our resources to fund programs that actually help communities, instead of just padding the portfolios of people who already have too much money. She looked back at me. And I want Nathan Brooks to lead that division. Not because of our history, but because he has 18 years of experience in nonprofit work and understands how to create real change. Because he never sold out his principles even when people around him told him his work didn't matter. Because he's exactly the kind of person this company needs if we're going to do something meaningful with all this wealth and influence. Victoria let out a harsh laugh. You think you can just waltz in here and steal my husband? Offer him some made-up position based on some ridiculous story about young love and controlling fathers? I'm not trying to steal anyone, Madison said quietly. I'm offering Nathan an opportunity to do the work he should have been doing all along. Whether he accepts that offer, and whether that includes anything personal between us, is entirely his choice. I'm simply telling the truth I should have told 18 years ago. I looked between the two women, both of them staring at me, waiting for me to say something. The entire Hastings family was watching. Gerald Morrison was watching. Everyone in that ballroom was waiting to see what I would do. "I need air," I said finally, and walked out of the ballroom before anyone could stop me. The hotel's terrace was empty and cool, the Denver night air sharp in my lungs. I stood at the railing looking out at the city lights and trying to make sense of everything that had just happened. The door opened behind me, and I wasn't surprised when Madison stepped out. "I'm sorry," she said, keeping her distance. "I should have found a private way to talk to you instead of creating that scene. When I saw you sitting there looking so unhappy, I couldn't pretend anymore. I couldn't watch you live half a life because I was too scared to fight for you when it mattered." "You said your father died 5 years ago," I said, not turning around. "Why didn't you come find me then?" "I tried, but by then you were married. You'd built a life with Victoria, and I thought maybe you were happy. I thought maybe I'd destroyed my chance with you, and the best thing I could do was stay away. But then I started hearing things through mutual connections. How you'd given up the nonprofit. How you seemed diminished somehow, like you were trying to fit yourself into a life that was too small for who you really were. And I realized that maybe walking away again would just be another coward's choice." I turned to face her. "So you engineered a CEO position at my wife's family company to what? Win me back? Rescue me from my terrible life choices?" "No," Madison said firmly. "I engineered a CEO position because I'm genuinely good at what I do, and Hastings and Reed needed someone who could transform their business model for the modern market. The social impact division is something I was planning anyway because I'm tired of making rich people richer when I could be using my skills to actually help people. The fact that it gave me access to you was a bonus, not the primary motivation. And if I say no, if I choose to stay with my wife and my current life," Madison's smile was sad, "then I respect that choice. But Nathan, I've watched you from a distance for 5 years now. I've seen how Victoria treats you, how her family dismisses everything you care about, how you've slowly erased yourself to fit into their world. You deserve better than that. You deserve to be with someone who values the things that make you extraordinary instead of treating them like embarrassing hobbies." "You don't know anything about my marriage." "Don't I? I saw how she told you to stand behind everyone tonight. I heard her call your work hobby projects in front of Gerald Morrison. I know she made you quit the nonprofit you built from nothing. I know because I've been paying attention, Nathan, the same way I should have been paying attention 18 years ago instead of listening to my father's threats." The door opened again, and this time it was Victoria. She looked between Madison and me, her expression calculating. "So this is what betrayal looks like," she said coldly. "I haven't betrayed anything," I said quietly. "Came out here to think. About whether to leave me for your ex-girlfriend who conveniently shows up as the new CEO of my family's company? That's not suspicious at all." "Victoria, when's the last time you asked me about my work?" I asked, the question surprising even myself. "When's the last time you supported anything I cared about instead of dismissing it as less important than your career?" She laughed harshly. "Is that what this is about? Your hurt feelings because I don't think teaching poor kids to code is as valuable as actual corporate success? Those poor kids you're dismissing are human beings with potential. And yes, helping them is exactly as valuable as your quarterly earnings reports. More valuable, actually, because it creates real change in people's lives instead of just moving money around between people who already have too much of it." Madison watched our exchange in silence, letting us work through what needed to be said. "I gave you everything," Victoria said, her voice rising. "A lifestyle most people only dream about. Connections to the most influential people in Denver. A place in one of the most respected families in the city. And this is how you repay me? By making me look like a fool in front of everyone at my family's most important event?" "You gave me everything except respect," I said, the truth finally crystallizing. "You wanted me to be your accessory, your proof that you could take a nobody and mold him into something acceptable to your world. But you never actually valued who I was. You just valued what you could turn me into." Victoria's face twisted with rage. "Fine. If that's how you feel, then you can have your precious Maddie and your meaningless nonprofit work. But don't come crying to me when you realize you gave up security and status for nostalgia and poverty." She turned and walked back into the ballroom, leaving Madison and me alone on the terrace. "I'm not asking you to choose me," Madison said after a long silence. "I'm asking you to choose yourself. Choose the work that matters to you. Choose to stop apologizing for having principles. Whether that includes me or not is secondary." I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw both the girl I'd loved and the woman she'd become. Strong, successful, but also carrying 18 years of regret and what-ifs. And I realized that she was right. This wasn't really about choosing between two women. It was about choosing between two versions of myself. The one who'd slowly erased his dreams to fit into someone else's expectations, and the one who'd always known there was more to life than money and status. "Tell me about the social impact division," I said. Madison's face lit up with genuine excitement. "It's everything we used to talk about in college, using technology and financial resources to create real change in underserved communities. Education programs, small business funding, healthcare initiatives. I want to build something that proves you can be successful and make a difference at the same time." That sounds exactly like something we would have planned sitting in that terrible coffee shop near campus. The one with the burned coffee and the wobbling tables? Madison smiled. "I miss that place. I miss who we were when we thought changing the world was possible." "What if we could be those people again?" I asked. Not the naive 20-year-olds, but who we were supposed to become if life hadn't gotten in the way. "I'd like that," Madison said quietly. "I'd like that more than anything." I don't know exactly when I decided. Maybe it was watching Victoria dismiss my work one too many times. Maybe it was seeing Madison stand on that stage and choose courage over comfort. Maybe it was just finally admitting that I'd been living someone else's life for 7 years, and it was slowly killing everything that made me who I was. "I'll take the position," I said. "I'll lead your social impact division, but—" "Maddie, we need to take things slow between us personally. 7 years of marriage doesn't end in one night, and I need to process everything that's happened." "I understand," she said. "I've waited 18 years. I can wait a little longer." We stood there on that terrace, two people who'd lost each other and found each other again in the most unexpected way possible, and I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Hope. 6 months later, I stood in the same ballroom for the launch announcement of the Hastings and Reed Social Impact Division. The divorce from Victoria had been ugly. Her family had tried to destroy my reputation, and Preston had done everything in his power to undermine Madison's authority as CEO. But we'd survived it all because we'd built something real, something that mattered. The program we created had already helped fund 20 new community coding centers, provided microloans to 100 small businesses in underserved areas, and established scholarship programs for students who reminded me of who I'd been at their age, talented, determined, and just needing someone to believe in them. Madison stood beside me as I finished my presentation to a room full of investors and community leaders. When the applause died down, she took the microphone. "What Nathan's too humble to say is that none of this would exist without his vision and dedication. He's proven that doing good and doing well aren't mutually exclusive. He's shown that the most valuable investment we can make is in people and their potential." She looked at me with the same expression she'd worn 18 years ago in that terrible coffee shop when we'd first started planning how to change the world. "And he's reminded me that sometimes the longest journey is the one that brings us back to who we were always meant to be." Gerald Morrison approached us afterward, the same kind executive who'd seen through Victoria's dismissiveness months ago. "Nathan, I've been authorized by the board to tell you that we're tripling the division's budget for next year. What you've accomplished in 6 months has exceeded everyone's expectations." I shook his hand, grateful for his support. As the crowd dispersed, Madison and I stood together, looking at the program materials that outlined everything we'd built. "Your father was wrong," I said quietly. "We didn't need 18 years apart to become who we needed to be. We just needed to trust ourselves and each other." "I know that now," Madison replied, taking my hand. "And I'm grateful we got a second chance to prove it." Standing there, I thought about the man I'd been 6 months ago. Diminished, dismissed, living a life that fit someone else's expectations. And I thought about the man I was becoming. Confident, purposeful, building something that mattered with someone who valued both my dreams and my principles. The champagne glass Victoria dropped that night had shattered on the floor, and in that shattering, my old life had broken apart too. But sometimes things need to break before they can be rebuilt into something stronger, something real, something worth holding on to. If you found meaning in this story about choosing authenticity over appearances, about second chances and finding your way back to who you were meant to be, please share it with someone who might need to hear it. Leave a comment below about a time when you had to choose between fitting in and staying true to yourself. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more stories about ordinary people making extraordinary choices in the face of impossible situations.